Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of our roundtable discussions, brought to you in partnership with Track NN. Track NN, for those of you who aren't aware, is a social enterprise business that is supporting autistic adults gain employment and help further development in employability skills. I'm delighted to bring a host of logistics professionals, shall we say, from the area onto the panel today. I'm going to ask for each of you just to introduce yourselves for the sake of those that are going to be watching to be aware of who you are and what company you're from. So if we could start with you, Tony, as you're next to me on the screen.
Yep. Hi, good morning, everybody. Tony Bellott. My career was mainly working with John Lewis and Waitrose in their supply chain logistics transport. And that spanned 41 years before I decided that I just wanted, enough of one adventure and started another. So then launched into consultation and obviously working for myself. So yeah, but logistics and transport is always been my love. It's what I've done for an awful long time, and for my sins, I also chair the Northamptonshire Logistics Forum, which is an opportunity for us to engage with businesses in the county, and engage with businesses in many different aspects. So yeah, that's
Thank
me.
you. Excellent, Mr. Sambrook.
So my name's Guy Sambrook, and I am the General Manager for the Travis Perkins site in Brack Mills. So historically, I've worked for third-party distribution companies and own account. So previously worked in Northampton for about 12 years, had a slight 4-year sabbatical elsewhere, but returned back to Northampton in July 2019. So yes, that's me.
Good stuff. Morning, Darren.
Morning, all. Yeah, so Darren Twizzleton. So I am the Senior Operations Manager for Pets at Home down in the SDC in Northampton. Been here a few years now, so pretty much spend most of my time trying to feed the nation's pets. Prior to that, spent some time in fashion retail, playing Mary Claus, making sure all deliveries got delivered. And before that, spent some time 3PL. So touched most parts of the supply chain. Yeah, and now spend our time working through Pets at Home's challenges of getting stores full and pets fed.
Excellent, thank you. Liam.
I don't think I can follow very well on Mary Claus. So my name's Liam Fassam, Associate Professor of Supply Chain and Research Director at the University of Northampton. Good morning.
Good morning. Charlotte, no introduction needed, I guess. But do you want to just let everyone know what you do with your many titles?
I'll give it a go. Morning all. I'm Charlotte Patrick. I am Key Sector and Knowledge Transfer Manager at the University of Northampton. I run a number of industry-led forums, one of which is HR, another manufacturing, and another is logistics, of which Tony is the chair. So I engage with lots of businesses and sectors across the county of Northamptonshire.
Great stuff. Well, thank you for that, guys. At least everyone knows who you are and what you do. And thank you, firstly, for agreeing to take part in this, what we hope to be a series of discussions now that with the ever-changing environments which we're operating in currently, I'm hoping that it will give people a bit of an overview of the differences within the organisations and where we see ourselves kind of now, where we're heading. And it is literally, I just want this morning just to be a discussion point for each of you to share your experience, if that's okay. So we'll kick off. Obviously, I sent out a slight agenda to you guys based on COVID. I think that is the big subject at the moment. And we've also got the issues of Brexit, which I think if I was to incorporate both of them, would be here for many hours. But, I think for today's focus for me, I'm interested to understand, and I hope the people watching will be interested to understand what each of you have done since lockdown, and over the course of the next kind of 30 minutes, how that then is going to translate into providing peak and into your operations and how you're going to effectively deliver with these restrictions that we're now having to live with every single day. So, Darren, I'm going to come to you first if I can, just simply because I know that before lockdown, obviously Pets at Home were a key player in the market for pet products and food and everything that you want for your animals that you have and people have at home. How have we seen that develop over the last 6 months, let's say?
Yeah, it's been, to be honest with you, when I was thinking about the question of what have we done, it's more what we haven't done, I think, to try and get through the last few months. So we, leading into actual lockdown, saw record demand through the business, both online and in stores. I think we saw a lot of customer behavior when the big supermarkets were obviously extremely busy and challenging. People diverted to Pets at Home to get their needs because they couldn't get them into a supermarket, alongside trying to get toilet roll and everything else. So we had a real challenge where volume essentially doubled kind of overnight, didn't it? I think for a lot of business, we were quite fortunate. We were key workers throughout because we sit in the food supply chain. So for us, it was sort of e-commerce is 110% up like for like year to date, and was sort of, we had a week's volume pending any given time. During times we've had to, from a site perspective, just redo everything. So I know some of you guys are familiar with the site, right? So we've had to change how colleagues enter and exit the site to try and put in a one-way. We've had to relocate smoking shelters. We've had to put our drivers and their drivers' mates into bubbles to try and protect them. The canteen created all sorts of challenges in terms of seating areas. We had to lay on free lunches for a while, which was to provide food for guys. We then had to turn to a takeaway because obviously that's what the government allowed us to do. And then finally, we've managed to get some seating with screens back in. So it's just been, I think every day and I think a lot of people I've spoken to felt this, but certainly in them first 6 to 8 weeks, every single day there was a brand new consideration, whether it be something coming out of the government, something close at home, the business. So from a comms point of view, Peter Pritchard, who's the CEO, went to daily video briefings to the whole group. So every day there was videos coming out of different change of protocols, and we were kind of, I think, found ourselves on probably a conference call every day with the distribution guys. Just there was always a new subject matter. So yeah, what do we do with absence? How do we keep people apart from each other? How do we make sure the equipment and trucks stay clean and safe? How do we have voice pickings? How do we make sure the headsets are clean and safe? And it was kind of at a great learning curve, right? But constant. It was constant, I think.
Yeah, just touching on that with regards to like headsets and stuff. You know, one of the things that I think I've seen in probably all the sites that we supply staff is that the need for that PPE has increased dramatically. So, for argument's sake, we provide high-vis jackets, basic PPE requirements for all the staff that works for us. Whereas typically we would have on sites where we supply a lot of staff, we might have a box of spares, right? Where people might have left them somewhere, leavers have dropped them back off, or whatever it might look like. We can't reuse them now. So for businesses like yours that have to have the headsets, have to, you know, even using the pump trucks and things like that, there must have been a massive increase, right, in the spend associated with protecting the guys. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think we got into 6 figures alone just on sanitizer. I think we were just trying to make sure we had enough to keep people clean. So yeah, gloves. We've had our Christmas fleet on site since March. So all of our additional trucks have been in since March. So actually, yeah, that's been an interesting one. Yeah, you're right. Everything. We bought additional pump trucks on site, more gloves, footwear, high vises, wipes, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And where does that money come from, right? We're just expected as an industry to bear the brunt of that cost, I'm guessing. I know most businesses out there have been supported in one way or another by the government. But I think all of those little add-on things are just hitting straight on the bottom line, right? We've now got to start factoring that in, which is becoming a major effect on profits, especially for a business that's like yourselves that are seeing huge growth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's all unplanned spend, isn't it? And it was during a period for a while. It was unplanned spend where because of lockdown, obviously our sales did diminish for a period of time. Certainly in stores, as you can imagine, although they were open, people rightly so were choosing to stay at home. So it's exactly that. It's just we've had to, as you do, look at capex budgets, look at everything, and try and just move spend, deprioritize projects. Thankfully, I guess I'm one of the lucky ones that work for a business that has been sustainable during this, and the business is able to support across the group really, and just finding exactly that more dollars where it's needed.
Yeah, no, of course. Guy, I'm going to come to you next if I can on the same point. Obviously, your business. I know you have previous experience of pets at home yourself. Now you're in an industry that's completely different, working at Travis. How does your experience over the last 6 months vary compared to Darren's?
I guess just touching on the similarities in the first instance, the stuff that Darren's done in terms of spacing, access into site, canteens are a nightmare. They're the things that we've done, to keep people safe in the first instance. I think our challenge when we closed down, and I remember it quite vividly, is we did close down. We stopped when we stopped for 2 or 3 days before we started to then get small teams in. And I think part of that is the number of branches that we have and that support councils, homes, NHS at the time, and just making sure we were getting product out to them. So if you couldn't keep a house with warm water, you've got a problem. So that's we sort of started to pick up in the first instance with probably around 100 of our 800 branches open. So bringing the small amount of people back, the whole process of furlough at the time of just who was being furloughed, making sure they understood what that meant, and then building back up. The TP group has gone through a round of redundancies and branch closures, which has affected us here. So we haven't. The volume has dropped. The sales have dropped. I think we released our market update yesterday, and there's been a big impact on where we started the sort of the first 2.5 months of the year. It was quite positive. Again, you're spending money on sanitizers, PPE, masks, which we're making sure people have all got. But knowing that your actual volumes are lower, and obviously we've been trying to cost cut wherever possible, in the right places. So it's been a challenge. I think some of our challenges now are product availability. All our suppliers stopped for that period of time, or certainly some of them, and then it's trying to recoup them. And we're the stuff that was coming from the Far East, we're trying to make sure that's coming in. That local suppliers, that is a challenge now for us. Is the stock availability, and then really knowing what our volume is going to look like for the next 6 to 12 months. We've had a boost. We've definitely, there's a lot of people in the DIY market have started to push their sales on. And we have seen that in parts of the group. Toolstation, Wicks, they've been sort of hugely successful. The building industry, it's how long will this continue? Is it just a bubble that as we sort of get 6 months, 8 months past the initial lockdown, is it still there? Is that growth still there? So that's going to be our challenge here is managing the headcount and to the volume that we may or may not get.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I guess that now moving forward, that approach it's going to be very much a finger in the air. Would you all agree to that? in terms of what we can't predicting buying habits has always been a tough job anyway, especially within the retail. You know, a lot of our retail clients, we have some that are really good at planning, some that aren't so good at planning, because it is such a finger in the air. And with these extra challenges, I think it's going to make that even more difficult, because we're you know, the numbers are starting to creep up again. We've seen on the news, we've gone into the 2000s a day in terms of cases. So we're all still in that phase of risk of potential second lockdown, which would cause havoc for so many different industries, but particularly logistics is, where does that come into it? It's a real tough one. Tony, in terms of your role in the logistics forum and the people that you spoke to, what other points that the guys have touched on, other business owners or just, you know, key operators that you're speaking to having to deal with at the minute?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can't be overly specific, but I think areas which touch on what both Darren and Guy have said about. So I guess a couple of key words for me would be confidence and volatility. I mean, confidence in both your staff and your customers, because and that's partly driven by the volatility. You know, I mean, from my experience of working at John Lewis and Waitrose, for example, you know, you'd be planning peak from, you know, the previous peak finishing. You know, it was a year-long process, and what you try and do is you try and build in as much flexibility as you can. But of course, I think one of the significant changes we've seen over this period is the shift to online trading, as just one of the factors. And I remember, again, from my experience, that the cost per unit of fulfilling an online unit as compared to selling it in a store, for example, is far higher, and the risks are far greater, because of course you're relying on a number of people in the supply chain to do exactly what your customers are asking them to do. So, but I fully understand the whole confidence. I mean, just actually giving people confidence to come to work is crucial, because, you know, people are still worried. And like you said, Chris, you know, will we go into lockdown again? I mean, personally, I don't think the economy can afford to go back into lockdown. But then if we don't go into full lockdown again, how do you manage through those situations? You know, I mean, there's some great things, there's some great areas to think about there. But as I say, I think volatility is going to be one of the key things for people. And I know a couple of comments have been made about having, you know, you might come in one morning and then all of a sudden your volumes have gone up by 100% on a Tuesday, gone down by 40% on a Wednesday. You know, it's just so unpredictable. So
yeah,
again, from my experience, as much planning has become a real key factor for lots of people, but then obviously making sure they got the right level of support in there, and particularly in your particular field of, you know, providing temporary staff, you know, agencies providing people that are suitable for the job, and are going to be reliable, and all the sort of good points that you're looking for out of temporary staff. So yeah. I'm going to touch on the recruitment element as we head into the more peak plan discussions in a minute, because it's a really valid point, right? There's been a lot of press about the level of unemployed, but also the level of skill shortage and all of that stuff. So I would like to touch on that in a little while. Liam, from all the stuff that you're dealing with at the university, you know, what elements can you kind of offer in terms of suggestions, or what are you discussing in your role as a specialist within logistics? You know, what is there? What can these guys be doing? What's different? Have you heard anything that you're not aware of today, or is there anything that people could be considering that you could offer in terms of advice? Or maybe I'm pitching that question completely wrong. I don't know.
I think that's the silver bullet answer, isn't it? Everyone's expected government and others to go into the cupboard, pull a dusty book off the shelf, brush it off, and come up with all the solutions to this and that B word, Brexit, around the corner. But I suppose in relation to the conversation this morning, there's two key things that are happening in some of the research that I'm doing. We're seeing a volatility in the supply chain in terms of price because of the factories being closed and because of waste. And that's caused in the past 3 months with food as an example. So I don't know if Darren's seeing this with raw material production. We're seeing a 20% increase in cost of raw materials. And that is only predicted to continue to rise because we've had bad yields and stuff like that that's impacted. So there's a cost of raw material piece flushing through. And then linking to Guy's piece around our over-reliance, and that's not a political statement, it's just how we are with manufacturing on Asian manufacturing. There's currently a price war between the shipping containers. So you will get much, much better rates going from Asia to US, which means anyone left in Europe is pretty much up against the wall, because no matter how desperate you are to get building materials or pet foods or stuff in for Christmas peak, the shipping lines are actually going east. They're not coming west. So they're the two key. There's an increase in cost and a decrease in capacity. And then couple that to the fact that our air networks have decreased by 95%. We really are in the perfect storm. Sorry,
that's a really interesting point, you know, because I think a lot of people when they order online or when they go into a store, they don't think about that, how they've got from manufacturer to store, and that, you know, it's been well publicized across the news in terms of when the PPE was for the hospitals was a shortage, and they were worried, and you know, Americans were outbidding everyone so that they could get the product from China, and people were paying Turkish manufacturers for stock that then the Americans were buying off them for, you know, double the price and stuff. So would you say that that's a fair reflection, Darren, on that point regarding product coming into the DC?
Yeah, it's interesting. Guy made the point as well, didn't he, around challenges of supply, and we've absolutely seen that. It feels it's I'll use the word normalizing with all the context it requires at this point in time, but we've definitely seen our availability dropped off quite significantly for a while, because the whole supply chain was either in a similar lockdown furlough position or fundamentally just couldn't get the raw materials. What an interesting, we had a conversation I was having with one of our supply team the other week around duck liver, and our sourcing of duck liver comes through the restaurant trade, and because obviously that has slowed, to get hold of duck livers for part of our product range has been a real challenge. And there's all these little new little nuances that are just popping up everywhere, aren't they, and just keeping products to run through. And some businesses, again, I think we're seeing some of our suppliers have really struggled just to stay operating as well, as you can imagine, because of all the challenges they're having around costs of material and just getting the right supply and demand. So yeah, we're absolutely seeing it.
Yeah, and going back to you as well, Guy, what impact has that had in terms of your service delivery promises to your branches? Have you had to extend that now that you have these challenges of supply product?
So in terms of our deliveries, it's sort of like it was built with the scheduled deliveries. That hasn't changed. That's still next day or every other day depending on the branch sizes. A lot of the branches can order directly themselves. One of the key products that the business, the UK, can't get enough of is plaster or plasterboard. It's hand to mouth with it as they're trying to catch up. It's probably got better over the last couple of weeks, but you know, there's been tales of a bag of plaster mix for being sold for 40, 50 quid on eBay, or being profiteered by.
Well, let me just make a note of that. I might have to.
We're talking about a £4 product.
Is that because of plant closures, Guy?
Yes, yeah. So as they've now caught up, and this is the interesting bit with people that were on furlough. They couldn't go out, they couldn't travel. In certain for the colleagues that work for us that were furloughed, they were getting full pay for 100% for 4 weeks. Not so there's a lot of kind of spare cash. You can understand why people, if they've been furloughed and they were lucky enough to have that, will be finishing things off, will be doing DIY. So that boosted us initially. But as I say, we sort of go back to how long will that last as people have been made redundant, or there isn't the money for them to do it. So it is an interesting time, and it is potential to be very volatile.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Feast and famine spring to mind there.
So coming on to, let's talk about social distancing quickly in the warehouse. So in your environments, I've seen from the customers that we provide staff to that a complete variation from one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of what is considered okay for social distancing and to deliver and be operational, right? So what changes have you had to make, if any, to incorporate social distancing in the workplace? Because it's sometimes impossible, right? Would that be fair?
Difficult,
Hey?
It is difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
You can start if you like.
Say again.
No, go for it.
Do you want to start with that, Guy?
Yeah, I think just that the bits that we said at the start, we've bringing people in, we've removed turnstiles so that there's not a queue. Trying to get people into the site as quickly as possible. Locker rooms, they're difficult to kind of keep space, but we're trying to limit who's in there at any one time. Breaks are a key one, so staggering breaks. So, I haven't got 130 people trying to cram into a single canteen, so that you're spreading that around. In terms of, it's a 500,000 square foot site, so actually those people have got a lot of space. It's when they're coming into key areas. So there's some products that need 2 people to lift. So we've got to make sure they've got signage, we've got masks for them to wear, and gloves when they are working together. Containers are another one if you're in close proximity. But I guess the hardest part is if people car share. We're trying to make sure that on and off site, whilst in our responsibility, that they've got PPE on, that they've got masks in a car, which some people are quite happy to do. So it's people want to come together. They want to shake hands at the start of the shift, or it's just what is natural.
Absolutely.
And it feels kind of counterintuitive to stop them, because that's just human nature. But it is really, that's when it gets quite personal, and it's difficult. But we just, from our perspective as a TP, you want to make sure people are safe and well. And I'm absolutely, if we have a zero tolerance on site if anybody has symptoms, because we cannot afford to kind of be able to close down. We're a single point of supply. We're always thinking about if like locally with Greencore, if that happened here, we've got to make sure that we're on top of it. And whilst it feel unpleasant to make sure people are staying apart, we have to do it. We have to do it. Make sure that we're not affecting the business.
No, absolutely. And Charlotte, I'm going to bring you in on this point if I can, because obviously we were both on the public health webinar last week regarding the stats surrounding Northampton and Northamptonshire in terms of COVID and where we're at, the fact that we're being how do they phrase it? An intervention town where they're considering localized lockdowns if the rates don't drop. And I came off that webinar feeling like Northampton was in a good place until Greencore. And I don't want to keep mentioning Greencore, but in your role within your logistics HR manufacturing forums. What's the kind of general view that you're, from your point of view, and all the involvement that you have in these different things?
I think it's very hard for companies. You're trying all that you can within the workplaces. Certainly, we discuss it. You've already discussed different methods that you're using. Some companies have been trying to install that confidence in employees to come back on site by using health temperature checks before you come on site. I was speaking to somebody in the HR forum the other day who was saying that they've got 20 people per shift going down, cleaning the door handles, etc. on each shift. Then they're allowing half an hour between shifts to allow for a clean down. It's really complicated because you've still got to be able to run the business, meet your customer needs. And at the end of the day, we're all individuals and we do different things outside of work. And I think the message from public health and environmental health was the don't leave COVID secure at the door when you leave the workplace. But then again, most of our sites are on industrial estates where if there is a bus service, it's now been limited, and social distancing on the buses and masks. So the vast majority of employees are car sharing, trying to get employees to wear masks. Masks, you know, that is the way of life now, but not everybody wants to wear them, and getting the messages across. It's a balancing act. And certainly the information we're getting across from Public Health Northamptonshire and Environmental Health, where they're sharing the figures with us, asking us what else we want to do, is really useful. I think the thing is that this is here to stay for a good while longer. This is our new normal. This is our way of working. But it's how do we bring everybody with us to encourage them to not shake hands, even if that is the way that they want to greet each other on the shift. It is very, very difficult with the schools going back now. That has its benefits because we're not being interrupted so much. But again, you've got mixing of children in bubbles, but potentially parents on the drop-off. It will be interesting to see how the next few weeks pan out, especially as we go into peak and people will be thinking about Christmas and whatever else might happen this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Darren?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I never thought I'd start this year trying to encourage people to wave at each other rather than shake each other's hands, but it's become a thing, I guess. And I think similar to Guy. So once I feel for us, once people are in and working, for probably the vast majority of our colleagues, they have the space to operate. A lot of them are out on lollops picking on their own or up on a reach truck. So once they're in and their kit's clean and they're safe to go, they're relatively low risk. We feel, but we have a mezzanine with picking our e-commerce orders, which is, like I said at the start of the chat, is our volumes have doubled since the start of the year, right? So we're having to put more people into that process to protect customer promise. So it is a real challenge for us. We have, again, some of the stuff that Charlotte mentioned. We've got people wiping down surfaces. We've invested in extra cleaning support to do that, and we have people essentially just doing a loop of the site 24/7 and just wiping down handles, keyboards, desks, kit, and everything else. Yeah, so it's difficult, and again, like you've got human behaviour. We like to be in communities, don't we? It's what we do as humans, and I think trying to ask people to not do that is challenging. I think smoking shelters, locker rooms. There's just these sites aren't built, are they? These places we're built to maximise footprint. That's how these are all designed. So where you maximise every single square foot you can. And then suddenly to try and rip that up and go, actually, we now need to do the opposite and almost over egg working areas. It's been a challenge. I think we're not alone in that. I think for everybody who's in a warehouse or any sort of logistics function or office function.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I know I've touched on this a couple of times with the points that we're talking about, but I know that, you know, I can think of 3 or 4 clients off the top of my head, each of which have a completely different set of processes in their buildings. Everybody's kind of trying to do the in-outdoors, one-way system where possible. But then we've got people that are using the canteen facilities, people that aren't using canteen facilities. Shift break between shifts, so that the 6 to 2 typical shifts are now 6 to 1:45, giving a bit of a gap. You know, there's all sorts of stuff before the PM shift come in, and then and I know one client in particular is even considering, and it looks extremely likely, to be bringing in a night shift to cope with volume of which they've never had before, which will mean, again, extra people, extra managers, extra training for the usual fire safety and all that stuff, first aid. So all of these impacted costs that are coming, I think, like Charlotte touched on, it's going to be here for a while. So although, yeah, it's volatile, we've kind of got to factor it in, right?
Trusting people, I think, Chris, as well, isn't it? You know, the feedback I've been getting is that people have gone to great lengths to put these measures in, but ultimately you've got to be able to trust your workforce to actually adhere to them, you know, and that doesn't just apply in the workplace. I mean, that applies, and you can probably edit this bit out because you wouldn't want to mention Rushden Lakes in particular, but having been over Rushden Lakes recently, I mean, they had all great intentions of sending everybody around the site in a certain way. You know, they had stickers on pillars and arrows on the floor and everything. And within the first 5 minutes, nobody stuck to it. And in the end, this is the right solution. But because they got so many complaints about it, what they didn't do is they didn't address the issue. They didn't address trying to enforce what they put in place. What they did was they just took all the stickers down. You know, that's just an example, but probably a bit of an extreme example. But I think there is an element of trusting people to be aware and follow those guidelines as well. I mean, and I know, so for example, I think there was talk of like, yeah, we all know operationally everyone has to use every square centimetre, basically, particularly when things get busy. Then some people have had to revert because some of the warehouse management systems that people use are quite, you know, they're really good systems that people use now, and they've had to change the way they set their warehouse management system up. So whereas there'd probably be a lot of flexibility in people moving between aisles, they've restricted the movement of individuals to single aisles, you know, just to do that. But of course, again, that comes with a cost in efficiency and timing and actual financial cost as well. So, yeah, but if it's going to be around for a while, it'll be interesting to see how, because I think some people will embed, you know, for a long time, even outside of COVID. But
yeah, no, I think it's true. And what are you guys doing at the university, Liam? Is the uni open yet? Are we at that point?
It's starting to open, and I think to pick up on all of this, whether you're an education provider or a logistics provider, we're talking a lot about cost and capex and stuff like that. There's a hidden cost, this social capital human piece, where a lot of people suffer from anxiety, hidden anxiety. The line managers of the future and HR directors are going to have some real challenges putting their virtual arms around people and bringing them on this journey. And we're finding that in the university with students as they come back in, maintaining social distancing. It is quite easy to put in place in terms of arrows on the floor and screens up. But the challenge that we have is something that I believe Darren touched on, the ever-evolving change. So the government said this morning, no social groups of more than 6. So does that mean we get class sizes now from 30 down to 6? We've been planning on 30. So it's I'm not saying throw the cost out, but there's this hidden cost, this social capital human piece with this evolving situation that's having knock-on effects now right through into Christmas peak as it starts to affect people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can't remember who said about face masks, but one of the things I thought probably a couple of months back now, especially as the retail started opening again, and they said it was compulsory for people to wear face masks in public, in enclosed spaces, but out in public, you know, shops, surgeries, wherever you might be heading. I am really surprised, and I don't know what your thoughts on this are. I'm really surprised why it hasn't been made compulsory within logistics and distribution centres. Now, I remember sharing a piece of legislation that came out that listed distribution centres. However, we're personally not seeing that pushed out as a compulsory measure by employers. So is there a reason for that we're missing? Or where are we with that kind of situation in your DCs particularly? Guy?
I think so. I remember seeing your post. It's because it worried me, and I got it checked internally.
Well, yeah, because we went out and bought 1,200 masks for the temps, that were working in and around the various contracts we have in the county, thinking that it was something that we should be providing under that legislation, only for some clients to say, we're not providing them, so we don't want you to provide them, because of where that conflict might come from. So, sorry, I cut you off there, but it's just...
I mean, just the whole mask thing is a big debate for people anyway. You know, as Darren and I have touched on, a colleague spends probably most of their time on site more than 2 meters away from anybody. And then you add into the physical nature of what somebody's doing, wearing a mask isn't comfortable anyway. But if you're doing strenuous picking for 7.5 hours, if you're having that across your face at that time, it's not comfortable. It's easy. Having said that, I don't think there doesn't seem to be a call or push through any that I've seen to have warehouse colleagues wearing them, because you almost push it out to everything. Then every time somebody goes outside, should they have a mask on? Because you can walk up the high street without one, but as soon as you go into a shop, you have to.
Yeah.
And there's probably more risk in the high street than there is in the DCs.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah. What about you, Darren? Has it changed for you?
Funnily enough, your post, I think, similar to Guy, made me go and ask some questions, because I kind of read it. I think it was a Friday afternoon, and thought, oh, okay, I might have to. My weekend might have just changed. So I might have to go and figure out how we're going to get through it. But for us, it was our the few stats. Obviously, we're taking our lead from the group head of health and safety. So for the whole group, has been driving all of these decisions, and from his perspective, it was around whether what PPE and the working environment you're in is what dictates whether you have to use them or not. There is a school of thought, I think, that is, some of it's probably personal opinion, some of it's scientific, but I think when people put masks on, it's probably a little bit like when you've got a crash helmet on, you probably take more risks, and probably sometimes your human behavior, you'll probably put yourself in situations you wouldn't ordinarily because you feel protected. So there's absolutely an element for us of not require, if we don't require a mask, actually hope it does help people be aware of how close they are to each other. And then we have, and this is by no means would impact it, if we have to, we will, but because we voice pick, and we have, as you can imagine, part of our gift is that we've got a real diverse culture and lots of different colleagues on site. Them asking them to wear a mask and communicate and confirm check digits and quantities and everything else is another complexity that these systems and the microphones on them just aren't built to do naturally. So it's one of those other weird nuances that we have to consider.
No, absolutely. Liam or Tony, have you guys experienced any businesses that you're talking to, or that you generally, or even in the university, in fact, that have enforced the wearing of masks within logistics?
With Heathrow Airport, is one of the things that I'm finding is a disparity between the use of masks depending on where you are. So I was recently inside Heathrow Airport, as we know, one of the biggest logistics hubs in the UK, and everybody wears masks, whether you're a user of the facility or whether you're a staff member. You move over to the retail sector and customers have to wear a mask, but staff members don't. So all the while you have this disparity, you're going to have people you're going to have these people saying, okay, well, if you can't lead by example, then why should I bother? So until we get a firm grounding, this is what we must do, or this is the way forward, I think you're going to have this ambiguity, and this ambiguity is what's potentially going to get us in trouble down the line.
No, I agree.
I think there is a bit of ambiguity there, because, for example, government guideline hasn't said everyone wears a mask. I think it's largely down to common sense. Most of the businesses that I've been in touch with, because it's the right thing to do, are enforcing wearing masks as much as possible. And obviously exceptions being around maybe people that, from a health perspective, can't wear a mask or struggle to wear a mask or what have you. And then as much as possible, they've tried to accommodate these people in work still, but maybe in a more sort of remote environment. So yeah, it's not black or white, but I think as much as possible, people see it as the right thing to do.
I think the challenge though comes, especially with our industry, where we have a lot of people car sharing and using public transport. If they're not using masks when they're car sharing, come to work, then get out of their car and have to step into the shed and put a mask on. It really is sending mixed messages, because there's actually no point in doing that. So there needs to be, when you're sharing a car under business purposes, you should wear a mask. We have to do this, but it should be from point to pick up. That is your working time, and you have to wear a mask, because then you are protecting the whole shift. If not, it's really worthless doing it.
Yeah, and I know we touched on Green Core, and I said that we wouldn't do that, but I'm going to do it again. One of our other clients car shared, a member of staff car shared with Green Core staff, who then tested positive within that second business. So the car sharing thing is massively important, especially, I think we weren't actually contacted, but I know that agencies in and around Northamptonshire were contacted about trying to stop transient workers moving sites where possible, which, for us it's doable, but it's also a challenge. And I think that has to be done in partnership with clients, rather than just being relied on as a recruiter ourselves. But moving forward, because I'm conscious of time, and we're kind of, I know you guys are busy, so let's talk about peak just quickly from each of you in terms of delivery of peak. With everything we've just spoke about, how is that going to impact any challenges, do you think, in terms of, let's talk about recruitment. So Darren, I know that we're working with you guys on a smallish scale in regards to recruiting for you at the minute. I know that the skills out there, they are out there, but they're also, like some of the other stuff we've talked about provisions and supplies. It's a kind of market for the highest bidder slightly as well when it comes to pay rates. Just for the panel conversation, how are you finding recruiting for pets at the minute in terms of what's going on?
Yeah, to be honest, it's again, from a supply perspective, in terms of availability of people who want to come and work, we're not struggling in terms, as you can imagine, there's people out there who need work and want work, which is fantastic. And we're fortunate to be one of the, in a position where we're recruiting full-time and temporary colleagues right through to some senior management roles. So we've got all that open. The interesting bit we're starting to see is we're seeing people from totally different sectors just giving it a go. So we've had, as you can imagine, plumbers who found themselves in a fortunate position come and work for us, but then 5-6 weeks later have found actually they can go get some work back in where their skill set is and where they want to spend their time. So that we're kind of seeing it from both ends. We're finding people's not a challenge. Finding the right people, as always, it comes at that. It's taking a bit longer. We, again, off the back of some of the positive of it, with, like I said, the e-com being double the size, we're now trying to recruit to a larger net headcount than we've ever had on site. So with all of the complexity and challenges we've just been talking about for the last period of time, we're trying to actually increase the number of people we have on site. And again, to do that, days of bringing 30, 40, 50 people in to do mass inductions are long in the past, right? So it's little and often now, and using people like yourselves is about us just sort of sharing the sourcing points for us to try and keep the right amount of people and the quality people coming through the door. Because from a volume perspective, like with all the stuff we've discussed, it is true finger in the air at best times, like we said at the start of this discussion. But for this week, changing customer behaviour, changing in buying habits from stores to online. There's so many variables, and Brexit, of course, again, which I know we haven't massively talked about today, but there's so many variables that we're kind of just almost having to take the approach of how do we maximise our capacity to the point of when does it no longer become safe, and that's our maximum, and how do we get to that point and batter down the hatches and see what comes at us almost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what about yourselves, Guy? I know you mentioned at the beginning that your business is picking up. Have you started recruiting, for yourselves as yet in terms of getting through the next 5 or 6 months since all the changes?
So I think we've started to increase some of the agency labour. So our peak arrives at the end of October, and that's just through essentially Benchmarks is our kitchen brand, so that it is a big push for all kitchens at that time. So the key thing for us is getting people and getting them to stay, because it isn't as big a jump as any with Darren with e-commerce. We're not looking to get a huge amount of people in, but go back to your previous point, is we're trying to make sure whatever role we're bringing somebody in for they stay, that they're staying through to the end of October, November, as that peak starts to go back down, because of that we don't want them working elsewhere and creating that risk. So and that we're in probably quite a positive position to be able to do that. We kind of know what our underlying volume is and what we need to hit, and if we need to carry heads for certain parts of the week, then we'll absolutely do that. We have to do that to keep them in situ for the next 2 months or so.
Would you say that that's a fair point for you as well, Darren, with the recruiting? That have you carried heads through, or are you still constantly on the back foot to try and get to your head count to deliver what your output?
A bit of a mixture of both, to be honest. Yeah. So we're in a position where we've said if we have to carry some costs from a labour perspective to protect service, and that's the right thing to do from every angle of where we're looking at it. The challenge we probably have seen is alongside that, trying to manage capacities versus budgets. When say we went into lockdown, everything slowed, so we said, okay, we can reduce our headcount a little bit, right? We can start to let some natural attrition take place and reset the balance from there. Brilliant. People weren't going on holiday because obviously nobody could, so your absence rates in that respect were down, although we had obviously high absence with people having to self-isolate, and it was kind of quite steady state. And then suddenly stores reopened, e-commerce continued to be double the size it was before COVID, and we certainly had to recruit back through again. So we're back to trying to put 30-40% more capacity into our into the site. So for us, it's kind of every time we start to go, okay, we've found a bit of a consistency, we can manage at that headcount one way or the other. The challenge comes either volume sort of slows or goes the other way and picks back up.
Yeah, okay. Charlotte, you're doing lots of work in the background on virtual job fairs. What's the landscape look like in Northamptonshire in the main? You think, from your perspective, is there lots of opportunity, like the guys have touched on, in their own businesses, or is it the reverse? What would be your view?
Certainly, I'm hearing from companies who are looking to recruit. The numbers, we're probably still working upon that a little bit from some of them. Some are recruiting smalls, some big. To what the actual picture will look like, I don't know. Certainly, the logistics sector is looking buoyant, I'd say, because we are coming up to peak. We've put together the virtual jobs fair for Brackmills as a bit of a tester to try and engage with Job Centre Plus, university students, etc., to try and see if we can cater for some of those roles across the county. It's patchy, I guess, with data at the moment. Certainly, we held the HR forum yesterday. Quite a few of them were touching on, whereas they may have recruited, say, 100 in a week, like you were saying, Darren, it's now potentially they're looking at 20, because how do you train them? Whereas previously it'd been the big, massive inductions for, say, 40. It's now maybe one-on-one and having to train extra trainers. I know others who are also looking at a night shift to try and make sure that you can keep bubbles of employees so you can still deliver and meet your commitments for customers. It's a changing face, I'd say, at the moment. And in some ways, I think it's still a little bit too early to know. I mean, in some of the meetings and forums that I'm in, when we're talking about the ending of furlough, what impact will that have on the labour market? There do seem to be quite a few people available out there with skills who are certainly trying logistics, but as we've all mentioned, you know, the plumber scenario, they've gone back to that when the work's come back. It's one of those things where I think it's just keeping an eye on it. I'm hoping that it will be a good season for the sector, shall we say.
No, I agree. And I think there was a few smiles there, so I think the panel probably agree as well. Did Tony or Liam, do you want to add anything to when it comes to the market in place in regards to recruitment at the moment in logistics?
Yeah, I guess on a personal level, there's you know, I don't think people are fearing there won't be enough headcount out there in the market generally. There is a lot of uncertainty around the impact of furlough coming to an end for lots of people. So I think there seems to be quite a high level of confidence in having enough people up and through peak, albeit accepting what Darren and Guy have said about, you know, getting the right number and getting them at the right time and what have you. And there just seems to be a big fear that, you know, come the 1st of January, you know, as soon as peak's over, i.e. Christmas peak, is what's that going to do to lots of people? You know, are there going to be lots of people out there? And yeah, it's probably an obvious analogy to draw, but I think there's a big question mark over the whole situation at the moment.
Well, I don't know about you guys. I know, Darren, you've been busy the whole time, so it's and it seems to be ever increasingly going. But for us, in terms of our supply, specifically within logistics, peak is coming. It's like it's landed already, which seems really, really early. We're recruiting big numbers across the county, and we seem to be getting new requirements come through every day. Which obviously we're extremely thankful for. And I think, you know, in terms of the delivery of peak, taking the piece out of it in terms of recruitment, is it going to be tougher than previous peaks, would you say, with all of the restrictions and the adjustments that people have had to make? Or just equally as we're going to get through it, it might be a bit messy, kind of attitude? Where do you think we're at?
I guess
sees this, then it's definitely not going to be messy.
Say that again.
If my boss sees this, it's definitely not going to be messy. We'll get through it. I think just, you know, it's a bit of the unknown, you know, especially if there is, you know, are people going to hold back? Because I don't, you know, a lot of e-com stuff in various industries hasn't held back and has grown massively. It is whether then people feel, you know, are they okay coming into peak? What will they do? Will the underlying volume stay, and then you still get the Christmas peaks? Is that going to impact? That's, I think, is probably the challenge. For my peak, it's driven by pretty expensive purchases, but you'd probably think they're already planned in people's minds. We have taken a reduction against last year, but it could come in. If people are at home and they're looking to change and whatever, a £3,000 to £10,000 investment in a kitchen, that they may well do it, or they may just say, I'll hold off and do it next year. And as we've talked all along, it is that huge volatility, and is it going to happen in people's individual positions?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
anybody else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think from our perspective, so I think from a pure volume point of view, like I've touched on a few times, we're at traditional Christmas volumes and have been most of the year. So our peak hasn't really stopped. So my biggest concern, and the concern I think for us on site, is the human cost, that our colleagues haven't had that almost respite and opportunity to take a break that they ordinarily would. So holidays have been restricted, and if people have been fortunate to go away, it's probably been locally, and a lot of guys haven't been able to even go and see their families. So there's that element. We've we've been flat out. So people have been again signing themselves up to go and do the work while it's there. But we're not even in what would be traditionally the busy time, and people have already been doing the hours and putting themselves in a position and taking on that opportunity. So I think it's that for us. And even things like, so we often, like a lot of places, would look to do some sort of Christmas bonus incentive, but that's traditionally always been based on attendance. And how can you put a bonus based on attendance in a world where you're asking people not to come to work if you think you could be unwell because of the risks? And so even rethinking that that's the bigger piece for me. It's that social human piece of how are we going to keep people energized and safe and well and enjoying coming to work when we haven't slowed down.
Yeah, and Liam, you're nodding there quite a bit of what Darren's points. So what's your research telling you about those kind of circumstances? What are businesses having to consider in that, or what have you experienced?
I think it links to both questions of how you manage peak and how you recruit people. I think the reason I'm nodding is that everything, when we look at this, rather than seeing a negative, I see this as one of the biggest positives the logistics and supply chain industry could ever have, because we've always bemoaned the perception that we have as an industry. And with Rishi Sunak's Kickstarter fund, or Kickstart fund, sorry, not Kickstarter, I keep getting in trouble for that. There's a great opportunity for people to come together, businesses, educational providers, professional organizations, to really put their arms around employees, like Darren and Guy are saying, addressing the social issues, addressing the diversity and inclusion challenges that we have, and making it a better, more attractive place to work. So I see it as a huge, it's a problem, but it has massive benefits in the long term for the industry, especially with some of the announcements, such as Amazon saying we're going to open sheds and recruit 7,000 more people because of the e-commerce rise. So I think this whole changing landscape of the high street can only benefit us as an industry.
I think that's a really good point, because culture has played a big part over recent years in terms of what makes an attractive employer. And certainly in the clients that we provide, we all know that it's half the battle of employing people is not necessarily getting them there, but it's keeping them, because there's so much business around. So maybe that's a good stance, to the way that the businesses are handling COVID and the balances around that, and the responsibility and looking after the employees will start to factor in their decision making, and it won't necessarily all come down to pounds and pence.
I'll do an unashamedly plug for ProLogis. There are other warehouse shed landlords out there. So they've done a lot of research globally, and they've seen this as a challenge. And they're starting to build logistics parks now around the whole mental health and well-being perspective, by having gyms on sites, creches on sites, places for you to go and have a walk during your lunch break. Normally, we build sheds for efficiency, which I think Tony was alluding to earlier on, and getting as many boxes through the warehouse as possible. Maybe we need to take a different stance, back to what Darren's saying, and start to look at the softer capital side of things. And if we start to build warehouses and logistics parks that are nice places to work, then that will change the perception and the cultures within the industry.
And I think related to that, the logistics sector, we were designated as key workers. So we've always had a big problem with the perception of the industry. But in lockdown, it was the logistics sector that kept us going. And you saw all of those news stories. So I'm hoping that helps with attracting younger people into the sector as well.
Yeah, and attracting skill into the sector. We've talked about it endlessly in the logistics forum over the years. How do we get new talent? How do we get new blood? They've got the apprenticeship route and all that stuff. But then how do you afford for 20% off the job? I think when you look at that bigger picture, with everything logistics has to offer in terms of opportunity, Darren, I've worked with a long time over the years, who you've not always been in that seat that you're in now, Darren, and it's fair to say that you've seen that opportunity and worked your way up, and the same as Guy. And Tony, I think you're man and boy at John Lewis, weren't you? 40 years or?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great subject, and we could probably spend another hour talking about this alone. You know, I enjoy every minute of it. But, you know, that whole investment in people thing, you know, I mean, when I worked at John Lewis, that was key, because everything was about the partners, you know, and I guess the philosophy was you look after the partners and the business looks after itself, basically. But yeah, investing in people in those sorts of ways and training them up, skilling them, you know, the whole retention thing is so important, you know. And I won't be unique in racking up like a 40+ year career in John Lewis. You know, there's raft of people that, you know, you work there for 25 years and they give you 6 months paid leave. You know, I mean, people have had your hand off for that these days. But I guess it's the way the world is changing. You know, people are more transient. People are more mobile, and that's what more people do. And similarly, like talking about peak, I mean, I remember probably 10 years ago, everyone was very clear about where peak was in retailing. Probably, I mean, I understand, like from Guy's perspective, you know, his peak. I think we have a similar group in Howdens whose peak comes before Christmas, sort of October, November time. Peak in John Lewis retail used to be 2 weeks before Christmas, because everyone went out and rammed the shops. But then, of course, we got, you know, the great American export called Black Friday, which comes at the end of November. And all of a sudden, that changed the whole shape of you'd be amazed at how that changed the shape of business in Lewis alone. And it brought peak forward by 3 weeks. And it actually took the peak away from December. So there are so many different factors now that, you know, that establish what peak is and actually where does peak land, you know, and it drives you.
It's very true. It's very true. And it is getting, you know, what was Black Friday is now turned into Black Week, Black Fortnight, probably Black November soon. But listen, guys, I'm going to wrap this up for today. And I just wanted to say thank you for joining and taking part. I hope you've all got something from it. I would like to suggest we do this again post-peak, so that we can have a view of all the stuff that we've discussed and how that's then translated in the delivery of peak and whether or not it was successful. And hopefully you'll all have had a great time delivering it. And you know, if we're playing a part in it for you, Darren, I hope, and Guy, I look forward to your phone call at some point over the next couple of weeks. But listen, guys, thanks very much for taking part, and I appreciate your input, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah. Good to see
you.
you.
Cheers all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone.